So when it comes to matchups in Demon Slayer, the character I've always seen matched up the most is Akaza, specifically against the Hashira since he is the only one to fight more than one, Rengoku, and Giyu. And it's usually like a 1v1 scenario like Akaza vs Sanemi or Gyome, but today I want Akaza to match up against everybody. Because the Infinity Castle movie came out recently, I think it would make sense for this video to take place inside the same area Akaza fought Giyu and Tanjiro, and then replace Giyu with each and every Hashira and see how they would perform against Akaza with Tanjiro on their side. If you enjoy concepts like this and want more like it, then please do me a favor by liking and subscribing. I make videos like this all the time and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. With that out of the way, let me explain the rules of this matchup, which are two main things I want to address. Firstly, Akaza cannot regenerate his head. I know he can do this, but trying to make a scenario where he would just keep fighting after his head is cut would obviously make this whole thing unfair, as none of the Hashira have an actual way in killing him other than the sun itself. And either way, Akaza did unalive himself after Tanjiro cut his head, so there really is no point in mentioning it. And my second rule is that he's allowed to fight women, just so I can make his fight between Mitsuri and Shinobu actually interesting. I'm just gonna ignore that little plot device for this video. Now with the rules said, I can go over the first Hashira, which is Tengen. Now I'll just say it now because I know what most of you are thinking. Tengen gets slammed here. The gap in power between these two is just way too wide. Now you could argue that Tengen has access to things such as AoE with his bombs that can maybe help add some extra range with his attacks to counter Akaza, or his musical score which acts as a form of precog to help him better predict where Akaza is coming from. But none of this will be enough to kill Akaza simply because Tengen doesn't really scale to Akaza at all. Matter of fact, it should be pretty obvious that Tengen doesn't even scale to Gyutaro. We see this when Tengen gets a chance to 1v1 Gyutaro and then he just gets off-screened. We also see this when Tengen's speed wasn't even fast enough to off-guard Gyutaro at the beginning of the fight. Muzan even said himself that Gyutaro could have won if it wasn't for Daki being in the way. So to make someone who doesn't scale to the weakest upper moon fight against someone like Akaza, none of the win cons I mentioned will be useful here. Even with precog, you can't dodge an attack against someone who is just way faster than you. Not to mention Akaza also has precog of his own with Compass Needle. So just overall, I think this will be an extremely interesting fight if they actually scale to each other, but I don't see a world where Tengen is lasting 5 minutes against this guy, even with Tanjiro on his side. Tanjiro at this point in the series already has better feats than Tengen, so both of them are basically screwed. Akaza should win this pretty easily. Moving on, I can talk about Rengoku. I know he did initially lose in the first fight, but for this instance I'm going to make this a rematch where both Rengoku and Akaza will have previous knowledge on each other, and I will also give Rengoku the Demon Slayer mark this time, as Tanjiro was able to unlock his mark prior to Infinity Castle, so by this logic Rengoku should be allowed to use it as well. And either way, it's just to make the fight a little more fair and not a slam dunk like the last time. So with that being said, since Rengoku will have the mark, I think his AP should be closer on Giyu's AP with this mark, as most of the Hashira are pretty relative when it comes to each of their base forms, and I don't think Giyu and Rengoku are that far apart to be completely honest, which means Rengoku will probably perform as good if not even better than Giyu against Akaza. And the reason I say that is because, like I said earlier, Rengoku will have prior knowledge on his Blood Demon art. The main problem I have though is that Rengoku, despite being a decent fighter, he doesn't really have any notable win cons to push this fight to his favor. He does have Tanjiro on his side, but Akaza will also have prior knowledge on Rengoku's fighting style, which could make it harder for Tanjiro to help out Rengoku since Akaza will have precog with Compass Needle, and the prior knowledge would make Rengoku's attacks extremely predictable. This fight will be a lot more closer than Giyu's fight since he had Dead Calm to nullify Akaza's attacks, which Rengoku doesn't have, so the fight will just come down to straight stamina and endurance, and as well Tanjiro helping him out. If Tanjiro is able to unlock the see-through world and learn to negate Compass Needle before Rengoku dies, then I could genuinely see a world where they could win, but honestly I think it's more likely that they lose here. They do have prior knowledge on each other, but I think Akaza is going to take much more of an advantage of that compared to Rengoku, and with the lack of win cons I think Akaza is going to win a lot faster against Rengoku compared to his fight with Giyu. I think this whole thing is 50-50, but I'll actually give Akaza a slight edge here with an extreme difficulty win. Alright, next up will be Mitsuri. Now as for the love Hashira, it's a little bit contentious on where she actually scales, because I've seen people argue that her at full power could be stronger than the majority of the Hashira, as all of her fights during the Infinity Castle has shown her without her mark, so it was assumed that she was in base during this whole thing, and people would compare her base form to other Hashiras with the mark and say her with a mark would be massively above any of them, which is just a little weird. I don't think that's really narratively accurate at all, but if you want to say that she does scale above everyone and her at full power would just body slam Akaza, then that's fine, you do you. But if we're trying to be logical, Mitsuri at full power should definitely be relative to Zohakuten, and can be argued that she is actually stronger, as her main goal wasn't to really kill Zohakuten, but to just stall while Tanjiro finds the main body. And considering that she was strong enough to at least damage Muzan in the final fight, I think it's evident that Mitsuri is at least stronger than Zohakuten in some capacity, especially at full power. But with that said, I don't think it's enough to actually beat Akaza on her own, but with Tanjiro on her side, it's possible they could win. Mitsuri's stamina and combat ability is nothing to scoff at, and she could definitely put up a decent fight, especially with her fighting style and her flexible sword. If she could stall long enough until Tanjiro can access the see-through world, then it should be a definite win. If this was a 1v1, Akaza is more likely to win, just mainly due to his stamina, which obviously has to be taken accounted for, and there's also his precog like I've mentioned, that's also another win con. But since I do have Tanjiro helping her in this scenario, then I think it's more likely for them to win than say Rengoku or Tengen. It's obviously going to be really close on whether who wins, but I think Tanjiro and Mitsuri have this in the bag. Next up will be the insect Hashira Shinobu, and it does suck to say, but I'm going to be completely honest, Shinobu is getting absolutely stomped. I know it could be implied that she's the fastest Hashira given from Doma's comments on her, but that doesn't really hold up that well if you consider Doma was only referencing other Hashira that only he has seen, not all the Hashira in general. So it could be argued that she's not even the fastest Hashira at all. But for this video, let's just say that she is. Even if she could blitz someone like Doma, that's not going to work on Akaza, because like I said earlier, he has Compass Needle, where he can predict people's attacks based on their fighting spirit. So that already takes away from her speed advantage. Another factor that needs to be considered is that she isn't strong enough to cut a demon's neck. Yes, her main gimmick is poison, and since it can affect Doma, you could argue it could be more potent on Akaza because you know he's a lower rank, but I don't think it's going to be fully enough to kill him. At most it'll probably slow him down, or he could just simply recover from it like how Doma did. If Akaza is able to break Shinobu's sword like he did with Giyu, then she's basically useless. Her only legit win con is her poison suicide bomb, but that would mean she would lose by default. She really has no win cons that can put her in her favor. I can't even say that she could stall for Tanjiro, honestly. Her durability and endurance isn't all that great compared to other Hashira, and I'm not comfortable saying that she could survive after a few good blows from Akaza. So I think Akaza takes this fight pretty easily. Now as for Morichiro, this is going to be a lot more interesting considering Morichiro has two major win cons on his side, that being Red Blade and the see-through world. I think a marked Morichiro with these two abilities could definitely hold his own against Akaza, especially if you think he has some skilling to Kokushibo, such as being able to dodge one of Longsword Kokushibo's attacks and being able to damage him with the Red Blade. This is impressive considering Morichiro was reacting to a more serious Kokushibo. Meanwhile, Akaza we've seen literally get perception blitzed by Kokushibo. Granted, he didn't have the Compass Needle and he was off guard, but still impressive from Morichiro nonetheless. And with Tanjiro on his side, who also has access to the see-through world, I think both of them together have a really good chance at beating Akaza. Now of course it'll still be extremely close. Not to downplay Akaza, he can definitely put in some damage on Morichiro, but Morichiro's endurance is something that shouldn't be downplayed either. He is probably the most underrated in my opinion when it comes to endurance. He can still continue fighting even after multiple injuries and even after he was sliced in half, so he can no doubt withstand a bunch of damage. And since both him and Tanjiro have the Red Blade, Akaza is going to have a much harder time regenerating from his injuries and have a much harder time fighting back against two people who can predict his attacks. So overall, I think this is definitely a slam dunk for both Morichiro and Tanjiro. They both have the conditions to overwhelm Akaza if they work together, so they should definitely take this at around a high difficulty win. Moving on to Obanai. With this one, I think it's pretty evident he scales above Akaza. He was able to hold his own against Muzan for a decent amount of time, who we know is stated to be above all of the upper moons. Another major advantage is his access to the see-through world and the Red Blade that he also has. Now you could argue that Obanai doesn't fully have access to the see-through world, as that was more of a brief instance of him using it, and we don't really know if he can consistently tap into that state. So I'll just say he most likely can't use it, but even then, without the see-through world, Obanai is more than strong enough to hold his own against Akaza. And with Tanjiro on his side, I think this is a very easy victory regardless. I don't see a way Akaza is going to finish Obanai off, even with the Compass Needle, considering Obanai is able to keep up with Muzan. So this is definitely a slam dunk victory as well. Next up will be Sanemi. So this is without a doubt the closest matchup so far if we're talking about a 1v1. I've seen a lot of arguments for each side, but if we're talking about Sanemi fighting with Tanjiro, then I don't think Akaza stands a chance. Sanemi can consistently scale to a more serious Kokushibo even in base. I understand that Kokushibo was nerfed because of the Marichi blood, but it's also important to consider Sanemi was also heavily damaged and can still continue fighting at full power. Even after his fight with Kokushibo, he would go on to fight against Muzan, sustain more injuries, get poisoned, but still manage to survive the entire conflict. Sanemi without a doubt has the best levels of endurance in the entire series. So considering that he can endure a lot of damage from characters way stronger than Akaza, and the fact he has access to things like Marichi blood and the Red Blade, which are major counters against demons, Akaza has a severe disadvantage. The only thing I can see holding Sanemi back will be fighting alongside Tanjiro, as I don't think Tanjiro can synergize very well with a very offensive fighter like Sanemi, but I think Sanemi is more than capable of holding his own against Akaza, and all Tanjiro needs to do is just negate Akaza's compass needle and win like how he did originally, which he can probably pull off even faster with Sanemi on his side. I really don't see a world where Akaza's making this out alive, especially if you're talking about a fully fresh and full power Sanemi. I think this is definitely a very easy win for both Sanemi and Tanjiro. And now finally, for the strongest Hashira, we have Gyome. This is also a massive debate within Demon Slayer, but I honestly think even on his own, Gyome is a definitive tier above Akaza. Gyome has been able to react and dodge both Kokushibo's and Muzan's attacks on numerous occasions, and in some instances can blitz people like Muzan, who we know is a significant tier above Akaza. And if we also consider the fact that he has the see-through world and red blade, I think Gyome can pretty easily beat Akaza on his own, even without Tanjiro on his side. Having Tanjiro would only make this more unfair, and Akaza would just simply lose faster at that point. So even if I give Akaza the benefit of the doubt that he's operating at full power with Compass Needle at the very start, nothing really changes either way. The stat difference is just way too big. So no matter what scenario, Gyome on his own slams. And that is really all I have for this video. If you enjoy videos like this, let me know by liking and subscribing. I plan to make similar videos to this talking about Doma vs the Upper Moons, so be sure to tell me if you will be interested in that. So with all of that said, thank you for watching.